On this edition of Panic Players, we're going to talk about a frontline starter, a closer who is in trouble, a post-hype prospect, and basically an entire lineup that you should be worried about. Oh, and a very thinly veiled excuse for some Chuck Norris jokes. But before we get to that, let's talk Aaron Nola. It seems like an annual ritual, or at least those of us who have been playing fantasy baseball beyond just last year, just know that this is what's going to happen, right? Aaron Nola, you're going to draft him way too early, and then mid-April, you're going to say, why did I draft Aaron Nola? It actually became a recurring joke because Aaron Nola would always get off to a really rough start, have a couple of outings where he just doesn't look anywhere near himself, and then everyone would freak out, and then he would be fine. So here we go. Aaron Nola is 0-3 with a 5.51 ERA, a 1.41 WHIP, and he's given up 4 home runs in his first 3 starts. His first start was the worst of those, where he gave up those first 2 homers. He has gotten a little bit better with each time out, but even his last start, he only allowed 2 earned runs, but only made it through 5 innings, and he did walk 4. It seemed like he had broken this curse, or whatever you want to call it, last year. He actually got off to a really strong start, and we thought, finally. But no, here we are again. Are we just, going to read way too much into his first couple of starts and panic for no reason? Probably. Now, I looked into his career stats, and I really felt like this was more of a thing than it really is, because April isn't even his worst month in terms of overall career splits. It's his third worst, but again, a 3.88 career ERA in April, that's not too bad. He is worse typically, though, in June and in September, the very final month of the season, so be warned. A slightly more pronounced split. He's typically much better at home than on the road, and 2 of his first 3 starts have been on the road. Maybe that plays sort of into it, but that also is a little odd because, the Phillies don't play in a particular pitcher-friendly park. But anyways, the bottom line here is there's nothing wrong with Aaron Nola. You shouldn't worry about this. I'm not going to worry about this, not just because of the historical splits, but just because it's only been 3 starts. And again, even if Aaron Nola isn't frontline, top tier kind of pitcher like he used to be, maybe not one of the very first pitchers off the board, he is still solid, dependable. Nothing looks out of place here, honestly. So I'm not going to worry at all. And in fact, his next start is against the Giants, who, yeah, they've been heating up a little bit lately, but not super scary. And it is at home, so there's a good thing. And then his next start after that on the road, but it's against the Mets. I don't think he'll get particularly rocked any of those 2 outings. He'll be fine. Don't panic here. I'm setting the meter down to a 3. I can't say the same for Trevor McGill, who is still the closer from Milwaukee. Look, I was all over McGill as a late round closer pick. Is that just all gone? Okay, that seems a little overreactive considering he's only had 1 bad outing. In fact, he hadn't given up a run until his previous outing where, yeah, he blew the save and looked terrible doing it. Against the Diamondbacks, he gave up 3 earned runs, and that also came with 3 walks. I mean, he was just all over the place. The real concerning thing here, though, is why should we panic is because it isn't just 1 bad outing. It's the fact that now his knee is acting up, and we're wondering, is this to blame for his ineffective outing? And is this something we should be panicked about in and of itself? He actually had an MRI done, which, even though it did come back clean, hold on. He's getting a second opinion here. They're going back for more because the way he looked his last time out, there's got to be something going on here. Let me say again, in his first couple appearances, he was actually really good. Hadn't given up a run, had an 8-1 strikeout to walk rate. He was the guy who was going to get saves in Milwaukee. Although, look, that whole team has gotten off to a horrific start. But yeah, there wasn't anything to worry about here. What I'm worried about is not him in terms of effectiveness. It's the injury. So if he does hit the shelf here, I still think if it's something minor, which it sounds like it might be considering the latest MRI results, you put him on IL, you stash him, and you wait. No big deal. But if there's something more here, then yeah, we maybe have to worry and move on. I don't even know which direction to look, though, in Milwaukee. There's a whole bunch of guys who could be next in line to get saves, but do you trust any of them? Joel Payamps has had some blowups, and he's just not a guy who I think should be a closer. I liked Abner Uribe last year. Maybe he'll get his act together this year, both in terms of control and maturity. He's looked better so far, but again, trust is a strong word here. But when it comes to McGill, let's just say this. How worried am I? I don't know until I see something else from him in terms of being on the mound and being effective and being healthy. I'll put it at a 7 right now. My biggest concern here is that the injury does linger and does bother him. But if that's all it is, it's probably something that both he and fantasy owners can recover from. All right, when I said post-hype prospect, given the hats behind me, you might have guessed that I'm talking about Jackson Holiday, and you would be right. Because if you have Jackson Holiday, then you're panicked. Another 0 for 4 day drops his batting average to 213, and his last base hit came on April 5th, more than a week now. His one homer on the season came in game 2 of the season, and ever since then, it's just been a total dry spell, not just for power, but basically for everything. The main concern that we have with him is plate discipline, like for any young hitter, and I will say the 25% strikeout rate that he's rocking right now is not terrible, a little bit above league average, but not overly inflated like last year. But I actually am more concerned about the walk rate. He's got one walk on the season, just one. Feels like he's still pressing. I don't know if this is going to change. I mean, look, flat out, I know it's still very early in the season, but we've got to see more than this. We've got to see some improvement. And he's starting to sit not just against lefties, but getting more frequent days off. The Orioles are not going to wait too much longer before they might consider sending him down again. Where am I at here? Let's put it at a 9. You've got to be panicked with Holiday considering dropping him. I'm not doing it just yet, but man, it might happen soon. Now, a team that's not new to this series, feels like every week we've talked about an Astros hitter, and here's another one, Christian Walker. Now, just when it feels like the Astros offense has finally woken up, in a 3-game set this past weekend against the Angels, they came through with 22 runs. And yet somehow Christian Walker did not get in on the action, at least not very much. Had a couple hits the first game, but another couple of offers. Another hitless Sunday dropped his batting average on the season to 164. And that's also come with a 236 slugging percentage. That's because he has just one home run, one double, and 2 RBIs on the year. And that is accompanied by a 31% strikeout rate. Now, as I said last week with Yainer Diaz, there's many players in this team that have struggled early on. I feel like this is just kind of the team getting acquainted to some new faces and, just trying to figure things out. Like teams get off to slow starts. It happens. The Astros kind of surprisingly starting off 22nd in both batting average as a team and runs scored. But then yet when everyone else is getting going this weekend, Walker is still waiting takeoff. The power is just not there yet. And as low as their batting average has been, their team isolated power, ISO, is 28th in the majors. The home runs are not there. Walker was supposed to be one of those guys who produced that pop. So clearly not seeing the ball well, not quite acclimated to his new environment. But I don't think we need to panic because I think that's all it is. He'll be fine. This is a veteran. He's been around for a while. We know what he can produce. And he'll get there, right? I think he'll get there. That strikeout rate will come down. The home runs will eventually happen here. We've seen it from a couple of guys starting to pick up the pace, like Isaac Paredes. And, usually there's a snowball effect here. So he hasn't gotten in the action just yet, but he will. So for Walker, I feel like 6, maybe a 5 or 6 on the panic meter, somewhere in the middle there. I'm not too worried, but at the same time, I hope we realize that this is a sort of aging slugger, aging relative to, professional ball terms. So like he's 34 years old. Is he going to hit the same way he did a couple of years ago in Arizona? No, I don't think we're going to see 35 or more home runs. I don't think we're going to see it ever again from him, but he could be in the high 20s. He should deliver a decent batting average. RBIs should be the main calling card here. So I don't feel like he goes up in value being with the Astros. I mean, clearly he's taken a step back for the time being. He'll be fine, but again, that's what he's going to be this year is fine. But a team struggling more than Houston is in the same state of Texas. Let's go from Walker to the Texas Rangers. Here we go. I warned you. By the way, did you know that the reason that there's no hurricane named Chuck Norris is because it would destroy everything in sight? When Chuck Norris plays dodgeball, the ball dodges him. Freddy Krueger has nightmares about Chuck Norris. Fantasy baseball players who have Texas Rangers in their lineup are having nightmares. Let's start with Marcus Semien, one of the most highly drafted Rangers, and you expect him to be a set forget second baseman, and you cannot forget how bad he has been. A lot of people are asking, do I bench him? Do I trade him? What do I do with Marcus Semien? I'm not supposed to worry about second base if I drafted Semien early. But you know what? There are just not many second basemen anymore you can say that with, especially with Marte on the IL, Holiday not coming through. I could go on and on, but look. Let's start with what Semien isn't doing so far this season. What he has done is accumulate at-bats and plate appearances, and you knew he was going to do this, but he finally got his first day off on Sunday. But that leaves him coming out of the weekend with a 123 batting average, one homer, 5 RBIs, 4 runs scored, no steals. Kind of an interesting dilemma here because, on the one hand, you can't drop him. I mean, I don't want to say because of where you drafted him, but still, this is a player that is not supposed to be volatile. He's supposed to be safe, right? You draft him for the floor, not the ceiling. A dependable player, what's supposed to be a good offense, a shallow position. You absolutely cannot drop Simeon. You can bench him though. But I am on record saying I didn't want to draft Simeon because I feel like his reputation had preceded him, and we haven't really taken into account the gradual decline. I kind of hinted at this with Walker, is like, okay, his best years are behind him. He'll still be close to that, but not that anymore. I feel it's the same thing with Simeon, and not just because of age. Simeon's done this interesting kind of every other year thing where he has some spikes, have some massive production spikes, and then he'll take a step back next year and then back and forth. So he should have had a rebound year, I guess, to some extent this season. And so far, it's been the opposite. But here's the thing with Simeon, like, first and foremost, let me say what he is. You got to know this going into it. He's an accumulator. And what that means is he will wind up with decent overall numbers because he plays almost every day. As I just mentioned, he just got his first day off. He won't get another day off for a while. He doesn't get hurt. He's out there. He's at the top of the order. He accumulates so many plate appearances that just because he is a decent, dependable player who can get hits, has some power, he will, at the end of the year, wind up getting you about 20 home runs. He will have a lot of RBIs and runs scored, but that's only through sheer volume. You're going to endure a lot of weeks where it feels like he's not doing much. And then at the end of the year, you're going to look at his stats, you're like, how did he even do that? But I think the profile leaves a little something to be desired because I threw out 20 home runs. He's kind of been in the 20s. He's had a little bit of a power surge a couple years ago. I think 20 is what you're getting at tops. And the steals, yeah, that's gone. He's never really been a stolen base threat, usually lingering kind of in the low teens. He had one year where he finally got over 20 steals. Yeah, that's not happening anymore. Last year, he stole all of 8 bases despite 718 plate appearances. I mean, that's what this guy does over the past decade, basically, is he's always among the league leaders in plate appearances. That's not a category in most roto leagues, right? Again, he accumulates, he gets you a little bit of production. That's why in points leagues, he's very valuable. All right. Points leagues, you can pretty much, even when he's struggling, just keep him in there. But man, in a roto league, I feel like he always leaves a little bit to be desired. What about batting average? Last year was at 237. The year before that, it was 276. Before that, it was 248. Again, we've seen some wild fluctuations here, but at the end of the day, his career average is 254. And right now, with how he's struggling to start the year, I think you're staring at maybe something in the 240s. So what I'm saying here is Simeon is kind of just a league average player, which is not what you want to hear, but it's the truth. Look, last year, the major league average was 243 in terms of batting average and 399 for slugging. That's pretty much what he's going to get you. I feel like I knew this going into this year, so I didn't draft Simeon at his price. My panic level is not as high as those who actually have Simeon because, again, I don't have him. I'm just going to put it at, let's say, a 7.5. I don't think that it's going to be much worse than what I expected. It's probably worse than you expected if you have Simeon. If you can somehow move off him now, I would do it, but I don't see how. But unfortunately, he's not the only Ranger who is really struggling. Let's just lump together a pair of sluggers, righty and lefty, Jake Berger and Jock Peterson. Burgermeister, not a Meisterburger this year so far. No home runs, 1 RBI in the past week, and he's only hitting 151 on the season. 16 strikeouts and just 1 walk. Berger did go deep twice in the first week of the season, but that all seems like a distant memory now. He is actively hurting you if you've been still starting him, but not as much as Jock Peterson. Would you even believe me if I said that Jock Peterson, his last base hit came on April 2nd. He's now hitting 070 on the season with no home runs and no RBIs. Was he hurt? Was he on the aisle? No. He has racked up 50 plate appearances and yet somehow doesn't have a single RBI. And the really weird thing here is he's not striking out a whole lot. In fact, his plate discipline looks pretty good. And the Rangers, as an offense, are, of course, not doing too well, worse than the Astros. They enter this week ranked 24th in terms of team average and runs scored. You know, it's actually almost shocking when you look at the box score for Sunday to see Jock Peterson is still hitting leadoff. But here's what this tells me. They're not just going to all of a sudden bench him. These are veteran hitters, and yes, they are as ice cold as you could possibly get here. Look, I don't blame you if you want to drop Jock Peterson. That's fine. He does not have to be rostered. Jake Berger, if you got a good, suitable replacement, that's fine. You don't have to keep these guys, but I'm not giving up hope here. Berger was actually one of my favorite values this draft season. I'm not going to give up on him just yet. I think he'll be fine. Jock Peterson, well, he'll have his surges, you know, what he does. Peterson has always been super streaky, both hot and cold. Once he gets on a heater, you're going to want to pick him up and play him because I think it's going to happen. He'll have a multi-homer game. He'll have a week where he goes deep 5 times, etc. So wait for it, but you don't have to wait too long. But overall, again, I'm really not too panicked here. I mean, it's frustrating. It's fine to be frustrated, angry, etc. But don't just give up on a guy for the whole season. I think they'll be okay. I'm going to put the panic level for both of them actually just at a 5. All right, so there it is, your panic players for this week. You also want to know who you should pick up if you're just tired of these guys being in your lineup. All right, well, if you didn't check out the latest waiver wire video, it's right here.